Councillor Edwards,
Yep.
we're waiting for, well, actually, Selena just checked in. So
I have Selena, Chris Brown, Travis Watson, and Kim Odin from the as folks.
excellent. Thank
Okay.
you.
One last check. See some my counselors. All right, let's go ahead. Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'm City Councilor Lydia Edwards. I am the chair of the Committee on Government Ops. It is Wednesday, April 21st, 2021, and we're here today for a virtual hearing on docket 0567, order for a hearing regarding biannual review of the Boston Employment Commission and Boston Residents Job Policy. I sponsored this matter and it was referred to the committee on April 14, 2021. Under the terms of the ordinance, the City Council is required to hold a biannual review of the policy. The last hearing was held in November 5th, 2020. The ordinance establishes standards and compliance requirements for applicable city-funded construction projects where a percentage of the workers must be Boston residents, people of color, and women. The last hearing, the committee discussed the city's progress in achieving the objectives of the ordinance, as well as programs and initiatives implemented by the city to improve the numbers. The committee discussed the use of Salesforce as a data platform, the CSL prep course, the jobs bank, and the creation of hiring of a full-time Salesforce administrator, and adding construction monitors to ensure that projects are in compliance. The committee also discussed the city's efforts in creating pipelines to the trades, potential changes in the state law, and the legal standards that are used when awarding contracts. I will also note a perpetual theme throughout most of our hearings is a question of discipline and enforcement. So in accordance with Governor Baker's March 12th executive order, we're modifying the open meeting law. Therefore, we're having this hearing on Zoom. This allows us to balance the public safety of the moment, but also allow us to do our jobs. The public may watch this hearing via live stream at www.boston.gov/city-council-tv and on Xfinity 8, RCN 2, and Verizon 964. It will also be rebroadcasted at a later date. Written comments may be sent to the committee email at ccc.go@boston.gov and will be made a part of the record and available to all counselors. If you would like to offer public comments and have not signed up to do so, please email christine.o'donnell@boston.gov for the link. Participating today on behalf of the administration is Selena Barrios Milner, Chief of Equity and Inclusion, Christopher Brown of the Boston Boston Residents Job Policy Manager. I think it's Kim as well. Kim Odom is you'll be testifying today? No. Okay, you're on backup, but you're here. Okay, got you. Got excuse me, Kim Odom on backup is also available to answer any questions. And Travis Watson, who is also going to be testifying Boston, who is from the Boston Employment Commission Chair. So I think that's it from the administration. Joined with me today from my colleagues is Councillor Braden, Councillor Flaherty, Councillor Mejia, and Councillor Flynn. Have I missed anybody? And then we will have public testimony. I know that there's several people who, and I want to apologize to them. They did acknowledge, they noted that they were a little bit disappointed with the lack of notice to get them to adjust their schedules. So my personal apology to you, Dick, and to those who made this conversation possible, made it stronger. And I want to acknowledge that, and we will do better. And I will do my best to get you the October or fall hearing date much earlier, and maybe set a rhythm so we set those dates months in advance so that you could come. So I do want to acknowledge that. So I will turn it now over to my colleagues for some brief hellos so we can get to the administration and then the public testimony. Councillor Braden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm delighted to be here this morning to hear an update on our progress on the Boston Jobs Policy, and I look forward to hearing the testimony this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Flaherty.
Same here. Thank you, Madam Chair, for hosting the hearing. And again, looking forward to getting these updates as it pertains to our status and reaching the goals of the Boston residency job policy, and also any updates with respect to investments in technology and staffing for the office to enhance our monitoring, compliance, and recruitment.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam.
Councilor Mejia.
Yes, good morning. Thank you for hosting this hearing. I'm looking forward to diving into the data. I think that it's great to do this on a quarterly basis. So it's an opportunity for us to learn, reflect, and figure out where do we move from here. I am going to be looking into more on the accountability and data transparency piece. So looking forward to diving in. Thank you.
And Councilor Flynn.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Edwards. Thank you to the administration team that is here. Thank you to the community leaders also for their ongoing support. I strongly support this policy. I knew the history of it very well with Councilor Bowling, Councilor Turner, and Mayor Flynn as well. But what I want to hear about is the enforcement piece, having a piece of having legislation or enactment and not having any teeth or enforcement is not helpful. So just the enforcement part is critical. And if we don't have enough staff on this team, this is the budget time. Let's ask for it, and let's see. Let's ask the city council and the mayor to say that we need more support from the city to effectively monitor this program. And it's our job as city councilors and the mayor to make sure that money is in the budget so we can effectively administer this important initiative. Thank you, Councilor Edwards.
Thank you. So now I'm going to turn it over to the administration. I'm not sure if you have an order. I could just go by the order with Selena going first and then. Okay.
That
Selena?
works. Can you remind me, do I do the screen share, right, myself? Yeah. Okay. Okay, let me pull that up. Okay, so I will be presenting shortly. I'll be making it full screen. I just wanted to get it up, but just wanted to thank you all for having us here today. Thank you, Council Chair Edwards, Councilor Braden, Councilor Flynn, and Councilor Mejia for being here today, and Councilor Edwards for your commitment to ensuring that we stay on top of enforcement and realizing this ordinance and making sure that we gather twice a year to work together on this. So thank you all. I also want to thank the many advocates that have helped shape this policy, and some of whom are here today. So I know Boston Jobs Coalition, the Black Economic Justice Institute, and others have been leaders on this issue from the beginning, and we continue to count on their advocacy to move the work forward. We'll be, as you'll hear in the presentation, over the last 6 months since we last met, we've made some progress through investments in staffing and technical capacity. And additionally, our jobs bank has pivoted to more proactive opportunity matching and pipeline development. So we'll share some of that work with you. We are all committed to the full participation of local residents, women, and people of color in our construction industry, especially at this moment in time when we know that the COVID pandemic has had a devastating impact on those particular communities. Boston has been hit particularly hard by unemployment, and we know that those that have weathered the greatest brunt of both the health and economic impact of the pandemic are people of color. And so we're committed to making sure that they can have opportunities in their backyard, and not just for work, but for meaningful life-sustaining jobs. And so we continue to be committed to that. And with Mayor Janey, there's a transition in leadership, and you all know this is an issue that's very important to her. And so we're committed to continuing to work together with you to realize the full potential of this ordinance. So I will, sorry, my windows, there we go. Okay, so I'll go ahead and get started. I know that you all are interested in hearing some of the data updates. And so I will go ahead and turn it over to Chris Brown, our BRJP manager, who's going to go through the BRJP project data breakdown. And then I'll share some updates on Salesforce and pipeline development efforts before turning it over to Chairman Watson for his remarks.
Excellent. Thanks, Selena. Good morning, Council. Thanks for having us this morning. So the data that you're looking at is 6 months. It's from the last meeting that we had in front of the Council, and from September. This data is from September up to March. So we had 33 DIP projects, which are private projects, and those projects are usually over 100,000 square feet. So if you go down to the Seaport area, you're going to see what we call development impacted projects, projects over 100,000 square feet. We had 96 City of Boston projects. So that means that they're public projects. And these are all the projects that are funded either entirely or, within, partly with city funds. The City of Boston projects, public projects. And as you know, we have a new ordinance. The new ordinance was signed in 2017, January 25, 2017. And so the new ordinance projects, about 95% of the public projects are under the new ordinance. All right. So within the 6 month period, it ended up being about 1 million hours. And the percentages are 27% Boston resident, 35% people of color, and 7% female. All projects, including new and old ordinance projects, we had about 3.5 million work hours, 26% Boston resident, 38% people of color, and 7% women. Okay, so this slide gives you the breakdown of the different city projects that we have. And we have 4 different city line departments that we monitor: Department of Neighborhood Development, Parks, Public Facilities, and Public Works. Each year, each 6 month period, the neighborhood development always has the most projects in terms of work hours. So as you can see, there's 574,000 work hours, 30% Boston resident, 68% people of color, 7% female for the Department of Neighborhood Development. Then you have Parks, which is a small department. It's like renovation of city parks, playground, basketball court. They usually have about 8 projects a year. And their numbers are 22% resident, 26% people of color, 4% women. Then we have public facilities, that includes all the city property, like City Hall, libraries. So they had about 156,000 hours, 35% Boston resident, 42% people of color, and 7% women. And then we have public works, which is pavement, sidewalks, throughout the city. Had about 22,000 hours, 27% Boston resident, 30% people of color, and 3% female. Okay, so, all right. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. So now we're going to walk you through some updates on the Salesforce platform. Since we last met, last time we met, we reported the investment in a new contractor, a full-time position to support Salesforce, and that person has since been hired. So now we have these 4 projects are our pilot projects on Salesforce. we're continuing to correct some of the standard reports. Part of the challenge that we're having is with the data integrity is coming from data entry errors, because what's changed in this new platform is that we have contractors entering their data directly versus sending us their data and we are inputting it. And so that's one of the benefits of Salesforce, is that, you know, in theory, you have real-time data and you don't have to wait for spreadsheets to be sent and uploaded. But the trade-off is that we still are in that learning curve and making sure that that everyone that's reporting is properly trained, and that we're doing some troubleshooting on some of the data issues. And that's something we now have the capacity to do. I know Councillor Flynn raised capacity and what we need. That's something we desperately needed, was kind of that technical support, and we have that in-house now. So we can try and troubleshoot. There's still a significant amount of cleanup that needs to happen, but as we're doing that, also kind of retraining or troubleshooting some of the data entry issues as they're happening, which we haven't had the capacity to do. We're working really closely with BPDA on this, you know, really cleaning up the platform. As you know, we have, you know, the BRJP sits within the city of Boston, but we have our counterparts at BPDA that are using the same platform to monitor private development projects. And so we're working closely with them to make sure that we can clean this up. And then we're also developing an outreach plan for training our compliance partners or the contractors that are entering data directly. We're moving to set up office hours so that they can work with our administrator on this and our team on an ongoing basis so that we can continue to ensure data integrity. Since we last met, we have grown as a monitoring team, and so we've hired 4 new construction monitors. Since we last met, 2 were to fill vacancies and 2 new monitor positions were created. So we now have a monitoring team of 7 construction monitors, which is the largest team we've had since the BRJP was started in the early 80s. I want to turn it over now to talk about our jobs bank and the great work that Janine McLaren is doing. So we held our first virtual career fair for, we were focused on the City Hall renovation project. And at that phase in the project, most of the contractors that were mobilized on site were union contractors. And so we held this job fair in partnership with the Boston Building Trades and had 45 participants total. We had, I don't think I put it on here, but we had about 40 representatives from different locals so they could meet with job seekers and talk them through the process of joining the union, when the enrollment time is, and we focused on those unions that were mobilized currently on the project. And so we're still you know, tracking down some of those connections, but we're hopeful that people were able to make the right connections to not just get on this job, but to ensure good wages and good work moving forward, good job opportunities. So that was held back in December, shortly after we met. And then we have another career fair coming up this Thursday. And this one is focused on open shop contractors. And so we have 18 contractors there that'll be there to talk to job seekers about opportunities to work on active BRJP projects right now. And so, you know, as you all know, construction is a real just-in-time industry. It's like certain trades are mobilized at different times. They come on projects, they come off projects. And so we're trying to do some real-time matchmaking. So for projects that are currently not meeting their goals, those contractors are going to meet with job seekers that we've identified through the jobs bank. But definitely invite you all to help refer anyone that you know that's looking for construction work. This is a really good opportunity because these are all active BRJP projects. And then just some summary data about the jobs bank work. Since we last met, we've had 33 new workers sign up. 30 workers referred to current projects. That doesn't mean they got work on current projects, but they were referred out based on, their availability to work. And then we've been working closely with the following resource partners because, when people come to us looking for work, they often can use other types of resources as well. So we regularly refer out to the Benjamin Franklin Institute, Madison Park Training to Trades program, and the other organizations listed here, so that we can make sure that they're not just sitting and waiting for us, but that we can connect them to other resources that can help them find meaningful work. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chairman Watson from the Boston Employment Commission.
Good morning, counselors. It's an honor to be here with everybody today, albeit in this virtual space. As you know, it's school vacation week. I also have a back hearing later today, so I'll need to excuse myself in an hour or so. But with that said, I'm going to jump right in and we'll try my best to be brief. Well, the BRJP doesn't have explicit goals for businesses owned by Black and Brown people. It's directly connected to the hiring of local workers, people of color, and women. It is also directly connected to the racial wealth gap. Therefore, I'll spend my time today talking a bit about Black and Brown owned construction businesses. Construction in Boston does an exceptional job at providing opportunities for businesses owned by white men. This is in a city with an enormous racial wealth gap, where the median net worth is $8 for Black people in contrast to $248,000 for white people. According to the recent disparity study, between 2014 and 2019, the city awarded approximately $2.2 billion in contracts. Roughly half the city's budget was spent on construction, $986 million plus or minus. These were mainly all union projects. Of that $986 million, 920 went to white-owned companies. That's 93%. 93% of construction dollars were paid to companies owned by white men. The vast majority of these companies aren't even based in the city. So what's happening is businesses owned by white men are accounting for their largest chunk of the city's spending, and in most cases, taking the money and spending it elsewhere. Of the city's $986 million in construction, 11.8 million or 1.2% went to businesses owned by Black and Brown people. So Olmsted Green alone has contracted 11.6 million to Black and Brown owned companies. That's a construction project going on right now. Granite Lena and Whittier 2, another 2 construction projects, 14 million. These are both non-union projects. In other words, 1 or 2 non-union projects have directed the same amount of money to Black and Brown owned companies than all of Boston's union construction over a 5-year stretch. But let's dissect that 986 million even further. Black owned businesses accounted for just 3.8 million of the 986 million, or roughly 0.4% of available city sponsored contracts. Again, in a city where the median net worth is $8 for Black people and $248,000 for white people. One non-union project directed roughly the same amount of money to Black owned firms, in this case, Bartlett A, as every single city-sponsored union project over 5 years. Look, I've said it before, union construction offers tremendous opportunity for Black wealth creation, but this will only happen when construction unions practice what they preach and significantly increase Black membership, increase the number of Black people within senior leadership, and have more than a handful of Black-owned companies signatory to a union. I've been to a number of these hearings before. I'm happy to talk about sanctions, fines, and repeat offenders lists. But at the end of the day, the facts are the facts. Greater Boston construction unions accounted for roughly half of Boston's contracts between 2014 and 2019. They still won't disclose the number of Black members they have. They don't have a single Black person in a senior leadership position. This is across every trade. And they also clearly demonstrated via the disparity study that they are incapable of working with Black-owned businesses. The businesses are there. The study proved that they aren't being awarded contracts because they are owned by Black and Brown people. Therefore, I recommend the following. First, form a council of Black and Brown GCs and subcontractors to advise the administration on how to create access and opportunity for their companies. piggybacking off of Councilor Royer's comments from our last hearing, we need to separate people of color in the way that we track them under the ordinance into Black, Latinx, and so on. The disparities amongst Black and brown people are different, and the causes and fixes aren't a one size fits all. I think next, regarding the city's sanctioning rubric and late payroll fines, this, whether intentional or not, is designed to hurt smaller companies, many of which are owned by Black and brown people. So as it stands, companies are required to submit payroll weekly. That's really easy for a large union shop. However, many smaller firms operate on a 2-week pay cycle and should incur added expenses just to work in the city. These fines should be based on annual revenue of a company, keep the weekly payroll for large companies, and adjust it to 2 weeks for smaller companies. And lastly, for now at least, we need to strike the reaching out to the union as a best faith effort for BRJP compliance. What ended up happening on 99.9% of union projects that are not in compliance is the following. I've chaired many of these sessions. So the company out of compliance is represented typically by a white man. He then reaches out to a construction union, again, 99% of the time to another white man, to ask for help locating a Black or brown person. For an industry that is well documented in discrimination against Black and brown people, this makes absolutely no sense. We can do better than a white guy asking another white guy for help finding a Black or brown person. Thank you. I yield the remainder of my time and look forward to answering any of your questions.
Thank you. Was that the last from the administration? Sorry, I'm having a technical difficulty. I'm trying to give my camera a little break, but if you'd like, we can turn over to, oh, sorry, we've been joined by Councilor Sabi George as well, but we can go straight to public testimony, or a little bit of public testimony, and then we can go through the councilors. Does that work? Okay. I wanted to go to some of the advocates who have been in this work for a while. And so I'll start with Dick Monks. Oh, you're on mute, Dick. You're on mute.
After a year, you'd think you'd learn by now to do that, but anyway, thanks for the opportunity. Thank you, Councilor Edwards and the other councilors here listening, and to the staff of the BRJP and all the different aspects that you're doing. I wanted to start quickly. My name is Dick Monks. I'm a member of Boston Jobs Coalition. I'm also a member of City Life Vida Urbana. So I'm involved in both a housing and a jobs organization. We have a common slogan saying strong jobs, good jobs means strong communities. We can't separate the two in this era at all. I also want to start by thanking Travis for your presentation. I thought clearly you're looking at trying to solve a problem and not just be frustrated by it. And I think that's something that we all need to be thinking clearly about. I'm going to get my prepared statement so I don't ramble on too much. But let me get it so I can read it. Hold on for a second. I'm sorry for the disruption. Okay.
It's okay, take your time.
Too much paper here. Shoot. Hold on, I have it here. I have it. Okay. From what we've heard, the BRJP is not working. Obviously, the numbers are better, but they're not good enough. And we can't be satisfied with better. The numbers of the requirement, the percentages, are not just random percentages that were picked out. They're based on what the demographics will show is doable and needs to be done. There are too many people in our communities, specifically communities of color, that are not being reached, who have the skills or are ready to learn the skills, and they are just not being reached. But I want to spend some time here, on my time here, to talk maybe solutions. And I was encouraged by both Ms. Selena and Travis, and you're looking for solutions to the problem. So I'm going to say something that we've talked a little bit about on Boston Jobs Coalition as an idea. And I think it's using the data that is now becoming more available. Hopefully Salesforce will continue to eventually be something that is universally used throughout the city. But the data that we show, that we now have, can show clearly the contractors that are doing better and continuing doing better around meeting the compliance numbers required by the BRJP. And we also, that same data can expose the companies that are not doing better and have no indication that they're trying to do better. And we think that, and whoever this would be, but we think there needs to be a calling of a meeting between those counselors. I think the reference to the way some of the training and these fairs that you're having is the beginning of it. But once we've identified the contractors that have a way of hiring MBEs and WBEs or fulfilling their compliance, need to sit down with those companies that do not meet those or anywhere near meeting those criteria. And that let's have the companies talk about how they are doing, what they are doing. The key question, I think, is what they are doing it and how they are doing it. And have the cross section of companies that are not present. And then from that, let's make all companies, especially those who are not meeting the requirements, come up with a business plan. I'm calling it a business plan, but it's a plan about how they're going to reach it. Not I'm going to try harder, or yes, I'm going to call the jobs bank, because we know those are good, but they're not sufficient. We need to have a very robust business plan on how these companies are planning to change their behavior. Failure to do that, I think, needs to be moved into a situation where they can then be fined and or denied future contracts. But I think it's a question of let's learn from what's out there. There's a way of doing this that is not rocket science and that it can be done. I think Travis is hitting on some in terms of who's in fact doing the investigation, who's doing the searching. If it's white guys talking to white guys, we know what the result's going to be. But I think, anyway, that's our suggestion, that we make these companies sit down and actually talk it out, learn from each other, and then come up with a business plan that they have to produce at the time they're bidding on a contract. And I'd like to do the same with the unions. You know, when you look at the numbers, and this is something that Councilor Turner taught us about looking at the research, you don't look at just the gross numbers. You have to go dig into them. And what we found is that there are certain trades that in fact have pretty good numbers and are pretty good at furnishing skilled workers that the contractors are needing to do a project. And then there's also a bunch of unions, trade unions, that are not meeting the numbers and cannot furnish these contractors. So a contractor can say, well, gee, I called the unions and they didn't give anybody. I called the jobs bank and they didn't have anybody for me, so they're in compliance. Well, that just isn't good enough anymore. I think what we have to do with the unions is the same we do with the companies. Bring them in here. My guess is that none of them are here today. I don't think you guys have subpoena power, but I think it's not having the unions present or the contractors present at these meetings makes this review sort of spinning our wheels. And I know the people involved here and the people who've spoken already are not those kinds of folks who are just interested in collecting a paycheck, but are really trying to make a difference here in the city. So we bring these two kinds of unions who have different approaches about how they staff and how they develop membership. Again, talking to each other, learn from each other. And again, we need to set some specific goals on the unions as to how they're going to develop their membership. I know I've shared the frustration with Travis of trying to get numbers from the unions and they just aren't forthcoming. But I think we need to step up somehow of saying that doesn't work anymore. You need to tell us what you're doing, how you are going to, in fact, increase your membership among people of color and among women. I think that's one way forward. And I think I'll end there just by saying, I think these biannual reviews are very important. Numbers have increased, like I said, but they're just not good enough. But I think they've increased only because eyes are on it. And that's what this hearing helps to do. So I appreciate the hearing. I'd like to see some presentation from the people who are actually working in the industry, both contractors and unions here next time. But again, thank you for the time and the presentation. And that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I go on to additional public testimony, I wanted to just respond. One, we put out a public notice, and what we should do and can do for the fall and for all of them is to make sure that the public notices go out not only to the advocates, but that the unions in general, the building trades, be invited. So if their lack of presence is here, I will own that. I did not put out a general invitation to them specifically. I went to the administration because for me, the administration is who is enforcing, who's creating the structure behind this, and who also has to comply with with this and actually make it work. So not that they shouldn't be here. It's more like if there's someone to blame for their absence right now, I will take that blame. The other thing is I want to, and I mean that for the unions and for contractors. Okay, so. And I will look to you, Travis, I will look to you, Dick, I will look to you, Selena, to get a good list, a robust list of people who should be invited at the next one.
Very good. Thank you, Council.
Okay, so I wanted to acknowledge that. My apologies. The second part, and just dealing with a lot of balls in the air on Zoom has probably a little bit off my game, but I will do better in the fall. I also wanted to just make sure we're also clear on what the goals are. I don't think anyone presented really what the and Boston jobs policy requires. So if I recall by memory, it's 51% people of color, or excuse me, 51% Boston residents, 40% people of color,
right,
and 12% women.
Correct.
And so when we go back to the slide that we were discussing those numbers, none of the projects in the past 6 months have met those goals.
Correct.
Okay, so that's
Correct.
another thing for those who are watching. I think we saw an average of 26% of the Boston residents, which is really disappointing because that's, you know, I would want that more than anything, is that Boston folks are working on these projects. Then you had, I think, like 35% people of color. That's closer to the 40%, but still not there. And then we saw consistently 6 and 7% of women for the past. We've even seen that before. And so there's, I wanted folks to know in general what the goals were, what the law is.
Good.
Now I'm going to turn it over to Angela. Angela, you ready? You're on mute.
Good morning, everyone. Yes, I am, but I'm going to yield my presentation because I've submitted it in writing for the records because I would like the opportunity to ask some questions. So when we get to that stage, I would like to be able to do so. So I'm not going to do a presentation. I will commend Mr. Watson for his delivery. I wish my camera was on then because I was dancing, because you are hitting every mark on the head. And it is so important for us to understand that written words, they matter, but now it's the execution. And there is too much money going around the city for it not to be shared and deliberately and consciously shared. So I thank you, Mr. Watson. And anytime you need help, call me at the Boston Job Coalition because I am definitely in your corner.
Thank you, ma'am. I will. I appreciate that.
I know Wawa, you submitted the written testimony. I didn't know if you wanted to also speak to that or if you wanted to, the floor is yours if you'd like that.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I would just echo what my colleague Dick and Angela both presented. I also share the sentiment that was submitted with the written statement. And I have a couple of questions that I'll hold off to till we get to that point as well. Thank you.
Thank you. So what we'll do, and I do see, my apologies if I'm just making sure I got everybody at least to say what they wanted to say before questions, which we will go through shortly. Andre Lima.
Oh, Counselor Edwards, Andre is our deputy director, and he's been really involved with the Salesforce process. So he's just here in case there's any specific questions. So he's not providing testimony at this time.
Thank you very much. Okay, then, so we'll go in order of arrival and then we'll go from an order of arrival from the counselors all the way to the advocates who said that they had questions. That includes Wawa and Angela. So we're just going to go straight down. Okay. All right, then. So we'll start with Counselor Braden. And again, because we have folks on, I'm going to encourage my colleagues to be brief in your questions so we can actually, for the advocates to have the floor as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It was mentioned that some unions are doing better than others. Could we possibly enlarge on that? I'd like to get a better understanding of which unions are doing better jobs. We've been talking to a lot of unions about this issue, and I'd just like to get the lay of the land and who's doing better and who needs to improve.
I can take that question. Usually it's the carpenters and the laborers unions.
Yeah.
The unions that are not doing as well are equipment operators, the mechanical trades, like pipe fitters, electricians, and plumbers. But usually the carpenters and the laborers are the more progressive.
Thank you. And are we engaging with these other unions, like the mechanical unions, to see what barriers are in the way and how we can mitigate those issues?
So I'd say we're at the beginning stages of that. Part of what we're doing is having those fairs where people can find out about the requirements, what kind of pre-qualifications there are, et cetera. And so we're doing, an ongoing effort with the Boston Building Trades to try to just get those conversations happening. But I do think, to your point, a more targeted sort of trade by trade conversation is really important, especially because we see the trades that are consistently underperforming over many years on this policy. And so I think we're not doing that currently, but I think it's a good idea.
And if I may just add briefly, some of the conversations that we've been having over the years with locals. So I think one of the number one challenges amongst many is when applications are accepted, where they're accepted. It's very confusing. It's not on a regular basis. Oftentimes it's not on public transportation. It's in the evening, not workable hours for many of the folks that they should be targeting. So I think collectively, if you could look at a centralized location where union applications are accepted, interviews are given, things of that nature within the city where they're going to be operating, accessible on public transportation, would at least help to increase the amount of residents who had access to the process across the board.
Yeah, it seems like there's some sort of very basic barriers that could be fixed. Now, in terms of equipment and documentation, I also heard from someone who works in workforce development that sometimes the need for some basic equipment like steel capped boots and some equipment can be a barrier to getting into the pipeline, so to speak, as well. Have you any understanding of that?
The only comment that I would have, and I'm a board member of Youth Build Boston, so just for full disclosure, but I think you really need in that situation the pre-apprenticeship programs like Youth Build Boston, who offers that sort of, I would say, more of a hands-on approach. It's because the pre-apprentice and also I believe a building pathways model, it's modeled after pre-apprenticeship, also offers that. I can say that there's not enough there. And if there is some way to partner with one of these big companies like a Timberland Boots to donate some steel-toed boots to a 501c3 with a direct pipeline through the city for some well-deserving young people entering the trades, I think that'd be huge.
Thank you. I think that there's many different aspects to this, and I think even those very basic pre-apprenticeship level, we need to work on really building a really robust pipeline. So thank you so much for your work. It's really, really important. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Before I go to Councillor Flaherty, I saw, and for folks, if you have a comment or response, if you'll raise your hand on the Zoom. I did happen to see Dick raise his physical hand, but I don't have all of you on my screen, so I will miss somebody if you don't raise your actual hand to answer. So Dick, if you had a brief answer, we'll just turn it to you, and then we're going to go to Councillor Flaherty.
I think Travis sort of expanded on the answer in a way. When I had raised my hand, I was thinking, and I don't really have anything specific to add to Travis's answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Flaherty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just real similar on the lines of Councilor Braden. Just want to, I guess, identify, which unions are doing great job with obviously recruitment and retention, and which ones need to do a little better job. And can we get some census information from each of the unions, and also talk maybe about a mentorship program? I know for a lot of unions, it's folks get introduced to it because their father was there, or their uncle, or their cousin. And I think it's important that when we introduce a trade to an individual, that there's also some responsibility on that individual to encourage, his family, his friends, kids that, he grew up with or she grew up with, to enter into that trade, because a lot of it's either familial or it's because they know someone that's in that particular union. So I want to make sure we put some emphasis on that, as we're recruiting, or when someone obtains a job in a particular union, there's really an onus on them to also sort of give back to their community to some respect, and reach out and open up and introduce their network to that particular trade. So I want to see if there's any efforts on sort of a mentorship portion of this as well. So census and mentorship. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I see Dick Monks has raised his hand. Go ahead, Dick.
All right, I just had to find the mute thing here. I just wanted to, I think those are the good suggestions, Councillor Flaherty. There was a number of meetings with the Boston Jobs Coalition and the Boston Building Trades, and also with Travis, that we tried to do exactly what you just suggested, Councillor. And there is, I want to say real, but I think the correct word would be total resistance into sharing those kinds of numbers. We had a simple proposal that we just asked the unions to give us the breakdown of the numbers and then set some goals. Even if it's low as 5 new people of color coming into the union this year. I mean, those kinds of structure, and the unions just were not into that, taking that approach. They have their methods. Some of their methods are more progressive, like we've talked about. Others are non-existent. So I don't know what kind of measures could be taken to get those kind of numbers. They are private organizations. They're not required under any law that I know of to give those numbers. Whether or not the city can position himself to put more pressure on them would be welcomed. And I'm speaking as a long-term member of the operating engineers, one of the worst ones who, in terms of meeting their requirements. So I understand from a union side why they don't do it, but from a community side, it's inexcusable. Thank you.
Thank you, Dick. And then just one other thing to mention is that obviously on the Boston resident side, a lot of the men and women that I grew up with that, went into the trades and were successful at some point, had the means and was concerned obviously about trying to find quality educational opportunities for their children, or in some instances, just a parking space or off-street parking. So they don't have to compete every night for a parking spot in front of their home. And a lot of them moved to the, to the suburbs, to the South Shore, the North Shore, or Western Mass. And they're still city kids per se, but they've moved. And I think that skews the numbers a bit as well. So just food for thought on the Boston residency piece.
Thank you,
Councillor
Councilor.
Edward,
Yes,
I'd like to say something, but I can't find my where to raise my hand, so do forgive me.
go ahead.
I'd like to address the union by asking, does the city have any leverage with the union? One, if they do, what is it? And if they do not, why not? Given the fact that a large portion of the projects in the city of Boston are union
No, it's Angela.
projects.
Are you still with us, Angela?
And
I'm hearing technical difficulties on my end. Everyone else?
we also need union membership. So even though I would think that the union would want to collaborate with the and developers, Black and Hispanic developers did not want to testify because I am out of the country and my connectivity is challenged. But the essence of my question is, does the city have any leverage with?
So I'm happy to speak a little bit on this, and then if the city would like to. With regards to this particular ordinance, this is about employers and contractors. And the leverage I believe the city is trying to get is through them to push then on who they get their labor from. So that would have been the goal. Is that this ordinance sets a standard. If you want to contract with the city, or if you want to work within the city, you have to meet this. And you go get your labor that meets these requirements: 50% Boston residents, 40% people of color, and 12% women. That is the goal. It's an indirect push on all of them. We don't have a direct ordinance that controls the membership of unions. They are individual organizations. We don't have ordinances. I don't know that we have the legal jurisdiction to control the membership of private organizations. Anyway, but the indirect way is to say, when it comes to our money, when it comes to our projects, when it comes to our zoning, and when it comes to what we're looking for, you need to meet these standards, contractor, and they're supposed to then turn around and push on the unions or open shop or whoever. And that's my understanding. If the city wants to add to that, the frustration I can understand then is if the city doesn't push on those contractors, or the contractors aren't doing it and they still get contracts, then what's the incentive to follow the law? So I can turn it over to if anyone from the city or Travis wants to add to that, but okay. And we may have lost Angela altogether. Angela? Okay. Dick, did you want to add to that? Or is your hand up from the last time?
I think it's still up. And
Okay.
I mean, I just want to agree with what you're saying in terms of the authority to demand companies to give us their data or demographic data is very limited. I don't know any avenue that really works. So you're right about that. I also do want to say, though, that we need to also make sure, you mentioned it at the end, that I think is important, not just the union side of this in terms of the supply, the labor supply end of it. It's also the non-union. Their records are, for the most part, even worse than the union numbers. So we shouldn't just completely ignore that factor. And to go to Councilor Flaherty's comment, I think it used to be that in terms of, we used to say, oh, the Boston residents, it was hard to maintain the numbers because as soon as people got enough money, they wanted to get out of the city, go further where there were better schools and fresh air and all that stuff. But now we find that more the problem is, and this gets into another area, people can't afford to live in Boston. It's turned around. And so it doesn't really impact on this conversation, but I think we need to be aware that it's a moving target as to reasons why people, working people especially, are not living in Boston as much as they used to.
Thank you. Councillor Mejia and then Councillor Sabi George.
Yes, thank you. I'm so glad that we do this regularly because I think it's an opportunity for us to really think about how we're going to get to these goals. And so I really do appreciate the administration and the advocates for leaning in, right? I don't think anybody wants to feel like they're being tolerated, obligated, or regulated. I think this is just, an opportunity for us to really think about a culture shift, it seems like to me, in a lot of these spaces, particularly when it comes to the unions. That's the first thing that I noticed here in the hearing is who wasn't here. And while I do appreciate Councilor Edwards, you taking on the responsibility, I also think it's really important for the unions who know that this is happening and that don't make it a point to participate in these conversations is on them too. So I just want you to know, as much as I appreciate you owning it, I think it's important especially for folks who know how important this is to show up. So with that, I just have a few questions. I'm curious about Madison Park and the role that the city is playing to kind of like think about this as a pipeline. What does that look like in terms of increasing the number of opportunities and jobs and career aspirations for students? Really looking into Madison Park. I'm curious also about accountability. We've been talking a lot about that, but I'm curious if I'm not even sure if this is legal or not, but if there's a way for us to tax these businesses or the businesses who are not hiring folks. Is there a way to say, for every single time that you don't comply, here's what it's going to look like. We're going to sanction you with your dollars, because we know that when we talk about money, people usually tend to react to that impact through their financial. So if they don't think that equity is important, maybe they'll figure that through their financial situation, they may want to be a little bit more moved. Is there a way to consider what that may look like? And, I'm also curious about the disparities between certain projects. It seems like some of them are 100% people of color, and then some of them are 0%. So I'm just curious about what the highs and lows are there. And it's great that the city is publishing data. We really do appreciate that, but data isn't accessible, especially for people who would like to bid on and to who would benefit the most, working people looking for jobs. So I'm curious, what can we do to make the data easier to understand? A dashboard of non-compliant contractors? Is there a way to provide feedback to the folks as to why they didn't receive their contracts? Like, what are we doing to ensure that we're not just sharing information, but we're also building the capacity of folks who didn't receive these contracts? And I'm just curious, this is one last thing that I'll say, is that we went through the data and found that Mario Susi and Son & Company is one of the biggest non-compliant contractors in the city. So I'm curious, why are we still hiring them? And can you talk a little bit more specifically about what the construction monitors will do, and how will they communicate with the city when contractors are not complying with the Boston residency jobs? policy. And the last thing that I will say to, I think it was someone's point in regards to the housing situation, we can't afford to live in the city of Boston, period, right? And if we know that these two things, there's a correlation between housing and jobs, then is it possible for us to create some sort of program where I know there's been some talk around workforce development housing, but that we are more intentional about what it's going to look like to keep people here in the city of Boston. And maybe that tax that we put on these businesses that are not doing business with Bostonians, maybe we utilize those dollars to support a program that will help offset the financial cost of living here in the city of Boston. Those are just some things to think about. I know I said a lot, y'all. I don't know what you can answer, but I would love to get some feedback on some of the things that I shared.
Very quickly on the tax component and sanctions, I believe that this ordinance is set up in a way that the sanctions part of it is really for non-compliance when it comes to payroll and not turning in documents. And that has been the chief area in which we have been able to, or been pushing the city for some time to start to enforce and start to put on some sanctions specifically for folks, because it was a problem and may still be a problem where they wouldn't even turn in the data. They wouldn't even turn in the payrolls to show who was even working. And the city, this is just for Councilor Mejia, because we, some of these conversations, she had not yet been joined our body, but one of the things the city countered and said we need to do was to make it easier to submit the payroll. And that's what the Salesforce conversation, you heard a lot about that at the beginning, is trying to rectify, so that when it's almost, you don't have an excuse not to. You can't say it's in the mail, you can't say the paperwork is coming, or so on and so forth. It makes it easier then to find them for non-compliance. So that was one thing. But I don't believe that, again, the hiring practices of a private company is something that we can fine anyone for. We can just enforce this law and stop giving them contracts. And that's where that we can go to your direct question about that. I remember Something and Sons, the name of the company. I would love for you to bring that up and maybe at the city to address that particular repeat non-compliant company and why they're still getting contracts.
Thank you for the translation, Councilor Edwards.
Thank you so much. I also want to add, I think you both bring up a really important opportunity because there's a sanctions process, which is about whether people are reporting on time. It's not as much about their actual numbers. But at the point of award, the city has the ability to treat a bidder as responsive and responsible. And we have been given guidance that compliance with the BRJP goals and the reporting requirements can be taken into consideration when considering various bidders, right? And so I think that that's something that we are trying to stand up a process that we can establish sort of a list for our department buyers of that's laid out in the ordinance, a list of bad actors, or I don't know the exact terminology. So we need to develop that, and that's something that we're looking to do. But I think that that's a really important lever to the leverage question, is the market signal, like, I didn't get this contract because of my performance. So if I want to work with the city, I have to do this. And then other people are watching, so I think that that's one of our greatest tools that we've yet to leverage. So definitely welcome partnership with you on that. We're looking to stand up a process to do that, but any ideas? I know this is a passion of Chairman Watson's as well. And so I do think that we have additional teeth that we have yet to use.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think that the fact that we even have to do this every quarter, signals how much work we need to do. And I think at some point, all of this talk needs to turn into some real serious action. And I think that the only way we're really going to address this issue is if we come down harder and be more vocal about hitting them in their dollars. I mean, they're only going to respond to their money right now. I see, Watson, you have your hand up.
You're also muted.
Got the hand down, didn't unmute. Councilman Head, thank you for your questions. I was trying my best to multitask, and I believe I failed, but I tried my hardest to get some of your questions down. So one suggestion, and I believe the administration is working on this, is, and you had mentioned it, is this bad player repeat offender list, right? So it's people who are habitually not complying with the Boston residents jobs policy, just based on the data alone, are put somewhere very publicly. I think that this would help in a way in that many of the developers that I work with, they want the lowest price, right? They're trying to save a buck, and they don't always take these things into account, particularly if they're not public. So what they're looking at is like, how low can I get my plumbing contract? But if how low can you get my plumbing contract and please take into account these other factors, I think that's a reasonable ask. I believe you asked the difference between some of the people of color hours that you saw. Some of the projects were, close to 90% people of color, and others were close to zero. In my experiences, that has a lot to do with the location of the projects. And again, it goes down to the union, non-union thing. A lot of the 100% people of color are close to or more neighborhood-based affordable housing projects, with some of the smaller to mid-size MBEs operating in that space. A lot of the 0% are some of the union contracts that are downtown. And you had mentioned Mario Susi, I believe. So forgive me, I don't have the data in front of me, and my memory's not the best, but I do recall, and we'll work on getting the data, that Mario Susi and company was a contractor who has historically done an awful job, to your point. I do recall having a very candid conversation with him at a Boston Employment Commission meeting. And subsequent to that meeting, if my memory serves me right, I believe his last two projects showed considerably increase. So for example, I think he did, I was just looking through my notes real quick. One of the projects I believe is like, it's an apartment. So he does a lot of highway and like kind of paving road work stuff. So the number is like 5,078. That's like the BPDA number of the project. But on that one, he had increased his workforce. I was pulling my notes to about 47% Boston residents, 36% people of color, and 6% women. Not where he needs to be, but if you look at his whole body of work, he's at least getting on the right track. So I think more of those conversations that we can have with contractors and do a better job at kind of showing trajectory over time would be helpful to these conversations as well.
Thank you. Councilor Mejia, I had a couple questions if you're all set.
Yeah, no one who talked to, no, did anyone answer around the what the construction monitors are going to do? I mean, and I think this Boston Jobs residency, it's not just about construction. I'm thinking there's other questions that I have in terms of just city employees too, but I don't know if that's part of this. I don't want to get too in the weeds. Councilor Edwards, I don't want to hijack the conversation, but I would like to know what's up with the construction monitors and what they're going to do, and how they're going to get trained, how they're going to be able to uphold, like what does that look like?
So right now we have 7 construction monitors now. That's the most we've ever had. I've been around a long time. Usually we were running around 3 to 4 monitors, but we do have 7 monitors. 4 monitors started within the last 3 or 4 months. They're being onboarded right now. And as soon as they get onboarded, they're gonna receive a set of projects. All the monitors have a set of projects that they monitor. So what this is gonna do is we're gonna be able, instead of a monitor having 20 projects, as we have monitors that have 20 projects now, with these 4 new monitors coming on, we're gonna be able to split those projects up even further. So the monitor would end up having half the projects. So we would be better able to, engage with contractors that are not in compliance because we have this additional staff.
That's good news. Thank you. Thank you. So I don't know if that answered your question. They go on site, they basically check in, they actually see if the numbers and the payrolls match who are physically there doing the work. And I didn't realize we had so few until now. I think 7 is actually still a small amount.
And would you all, from that point, then also, if they're not in compliance, do we shut down the site? What happens? I'm sorry, I'm curious.
Yeah, it's okay. So we have corrective action meetings. So what happens is they monitor the payrolls, right? We're looking at the project. We see a contractor that's not in compliance. the first step is to send an email to the general contractor. Hey, listen, Chris Brown Painting is not in compliance. What's going on? How many more hours on the project? Are they bringing, they're low in the Boston resident category. When can they bring additional Boston residents onto the project? So the first interaction is via email. And so when we get the response back, if it's not sufficient, the contractor might say, yeah, okay, I have somebody out on site next week, right? But if they send something back saying basically, I'm not going to do it, then we call them in for a corrective action meeting, a physical meeting, and then we address the topic at that meeting.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So this is more not just for my own benefit, from the people who are tuning in and trying to figure out how you all function. I'm curious though, at some point, where is the shutdown list? Where is the shutdown notice comes in? Like, is there, in terms of accountability and monitoring, where does this say, hey, because people can buy time. I know people can dance around an issue and finish the work, but by the time you get back at them, they're done and they've been paid. So like, at what point is there we're shutting this down until you comply? Does that happen at all?
Right, so yeah, we don't have that leverage. We do have, on the public projects, we do have the ability to withhold payments. So if it gets to the point where, the contractor is ignoring us, not showing up to meetings, and a lot of these project contractors go from project to project, like Mario Susie. So, and Mario Susie has increased their numbers. Travis has stated, at one point they were horrible, but they have increased and hired people. So, and so we do have the ability to withhold payment as well on public projects.
Y'all lucky I'm shutting everybody down. No, I'm just joking. Thank you.
Well, we can't actually shut, we don't have that type of leverage.
I know. I'm just teasing. Councilor Edwards, take back the mic. Put me on mute.
I'm taking it back. So a couple questions and some things that I had brought up before. One, my biggest concern, and I've heard it, you've heard this from me before, and I'll just, again, and I've been asking for this. I know that we don't have Chief Barros anymore, but he was one of the folks I was pushing on the most, which was wage theft. And I've seen it happen in my district it was a city project. So they were compliant. They had 100% people of color working on it. They were not Boston residents. They didn't meet the women's component. They were people of color, men of color. And they ended up having to put a lien on the city project to get paid. And so this is a concern of mine. And I'll say this, if they were organized in a union, I do know that they would have had at least an intermediary who would have gone on that. Like, it would have been loud. You didn't pay anybody. They did not. And so they had, Greater Boston Legal Services. They had some friends who contacted me because I used to work there. It shouldn't have been that way. Again, it was a city project. And so, at the time I brought this up, and I'm bringing it up again, workforce development, and they live in the same house under the same economic development home. So there was a list of bad actors, not only in not complying with this, but I wanted a list of bad actors who don't pay their workers. And I didn't want them to be getting any more contracts as well. And so I bring that up again that's not a hard list to find. You can find who filed it at the Attorney General's office, what liens were put on. I can't think of a greater immediate urgent, never again will you get a contract from the city of Boston than if you don't pay the workers with our money on our building. I'm just gonna say that again. I can't. It was so it's behind my house. It's so disappointing in East Boston that happened. And I'm gonna, I've not really gotten a satisfactory kind of answer, which, I'm asking to marry the two lists. If you have a company ever that has been proven not to pay its workers, ever, I don't want to hear about how they're bidding and still able to get contracts with the city of Boston to take our money, to not pay people. I can't. And it's not been married. It's not been part of this conversation. And it's not been part of the denial of contracts. And I can check on that
Needs to
company.
be.
I hope to God that company didn't get another contract after this. I can check and see. But if I find that they did, I'm gonna wonder what the hell. So that's my frustration. The other thing is, let's talk about the other big opportunity that presents itself, which is the PLA for Suffolk Downs. Project labor agreement for the entire campus of Suffolk Downs, right? 161 acres between East Boston and Revere, and they have the entire thing will be union built. The entire thing. And I supported that. I know, I see you, Travis. Oh, okay. I did. Okay. I wasn't sure if that was for what that was about. Okay, cool. I misread it. Misread the. So I did support it, and I'm proud I supported that the campus be union built. We're talking about 20 years of union work and construction build out, right? You could build an entire middle class in a city with that. And my biggest push had been, I need to see, and I want us to be now at the table to say, this is East Boston High School. 90% of these kids live in East Boston, walk to school. This is the Latinx community. So this school is rich with diversity. Young men and women of color. I want that at the table with the vocational services, where they're training folks with ELL right now and making sure that they have job placement and ELL. And I want to know the trades are there, and I want to know how this pipeline could work. You're talking about how the city could be doing this. I want, to sit down with you, Travis, to sit down with you, Dick, to sit down and literally say, love the city, but we have it here. The world is here right now. They have not broke ground on Boston yet. They're working in Revere. That's different, but they are going to come to Boston side. So what is, if we had the opportunity, we do actually, we now have the opportunity. What's the pipeline you're talking about? Now, of course, I'm only looking at East Boston. I know you guys are going to look citywide, but I'm going to look to feed my district first and make sure my kids get those jobs. No offense to everybody. It's the district city councilor viewpoint, but we have the diversity in East Boston to also help to do that. But so now here it is. So I'd love to meet with all of you, to talk with all of you, because if we talk about the pipelines, we talk about all these ideas, we talk about all these like innovative ways. We have $1 million going to job training and building Boston, building pathways alone. We have another $1 million that's going to ELL training in East Boston. It was fought for. That's it. Like just those two major things to build the capacity. And then we have the high school, of course, we have a couple charter schools as well, charter high schools as well, and they're extremely diverse as well in East Boston. If you have all of this together in one community, show me that your ideas will work. Let's see how this works. Let's do it. And so I want to sit down with you. I want to figure out how we get the trades in the table, that particular table, before the shovels hit the ground, because that's a private property. It's completely private. So it's different in terms of the way the city works in there. We have a commitment from Tom O'Brien to meet the Boston resident jobs policy that is in the cooperation agreement for the entire campus. Even though Revere didn't do anything for it. No offense, Revere, you didn't do a damn thing. But nothing. But you welcome Revere, and we're here. And so now we're there. So I wanted to put those two major buckets out there. I want to see a list in 6 months. Wage theft. Office of Workforce Development should have a list of folks who have done wrong by people in Boston. That list needs to be looked at in comparison to your list. And I can't stand the thought of anybody getting any more projects in the city of Boston or on public, especially if they don't pay their workers. And then let's show what pipelines look like when we dream together. And let's show how we can go all the way to the middle school if necessary in East Boston and pull those kids up with the youth build Boston, with the building pathways. And when you marry push, move, and track together, that we show up and we will show out. So those are my thoughts. I saw Dick raised your hand. Raised your hand. You're muted, Councilor Mejia, if you were saying something. Were you saying something, Councilor Mejia? No, okay. Still muted. I don't know if you're saying something.
Okay, now I got it.
Okay.
I just say, call me up. BJC is more than anxious to be part of that conversation. I think there's a lot to explore. I mean, you clearly understand it's not just a simple meeting to sit down and make the adjustments and we're all set. It's going to be, we need to be creative, but I think there's enough people with that ability that it's doable. So I'm very enthusiastic about being in touch and working with this.
Excellent. Thank you. Who else raised their hand? I see Travis you raised your hand.
Yes, thank you, Councilor. I would just agree with my friend and ally, Dick Monk's encouraged. I will be fully vaccinated in 2 weeks, so hopefully this can be one of my first in-person meetings. Very much look forward to it sometime, summer, fall, whenever your schedule permits.
Absolutely. I think it's the other big project I'll mention is and I think we already have a pipeline for the housing development in Bunker Hill in Charlestown. The carpenters have actually been part of meeting with the tenants of the housing development, and they have been pushing for job pipelines for folks who currently are in public housing to be part of building the newer building. So I'm very happy about that. But intentions is what we have a lot of, is what we're seeing. So again, maybe that's another meeting and a group of folks to coordinate with. Councilor Braden, you raised your hand.
I'd also like to join you in that conversation. we are facing in our district, Alston Brighton, we have a huge amount of development in the pipeline, and it is especially in relation to development of on Harvard property. We are having, when we have in conversation with developers, we are constantly citing the Boston Jobs residency policy, and trying to raise the level and make sure that our local Boston residents will benefit from this huge amount of development that's in the horizon. And again, it's a bit like Suffolk Downs. It probably has a 15 to 20 year pipeline, project duration, but it is a huge amount of work. So thank you. I look forward, I'd love to meet with Dick and Travis, and again continue that conversation. And it's an exciting. I think it will not happen accidentally. It has to be very intentional, and we have to really push to get it to happen. So count me in. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think for what I've learned, not only inviting the contractors and the unions, but I think another entity that has not been invited before and is BPS. Specifically trying to, getting our BPS folks in there so that we can get to the high school principals, so that we can get and make sure that there's this is not to overlook or to ignore Madison Park in any way, shape, or form, but this is really also about making it part of the culture and conversation for some kids in school, so that they hear that this is an opportunity, a thought, that's something that they may want to do as well. If it doesn't speak to you earlier on, you may not ever think about it. I see two hands are raised, Travis and Travis, sorry. Liz, your hand was already up.
Thank you, Councilor. I will be extremely brief here. Yes, to BPS, I've actually been on an advisory committee with the Dearborn STEM Academy, and some of their career pathway partnerships that they're trying to establish over there fits directly in with kind of the pipeline in the construction industry. And it also goes to soft costs, architects, engineers, environmental engineers, things like that. And I'm not trying to bring too many friends to your party and crash it, but if we could all make some space for some Black and Brown owned general contractors and subcontractors, I think they could offer a unique perspective to the conversation. Thank you.
And I'll look to you for some of those names. Thank you. In terms of, it's about 11:30. I wasn't sure if you would want to raise your hands if you had any additional questions or comments. If not, I have some homework to do. And just for folks to know, we will have the second hearing. We have this twice a year in the fall. And by then, I think we will put out these questions to a lot of stakeholders and expect them to come at the next one with some answers. I think that's what's the best I can do right now, and make sure that we have the numbers. And hopefully by then, I know we always ask about how many sanctions have been given out, how many, what movements have made, what contracts have been denied. And I'll just put it to the city that by the fall, I hope to see that there are where that movement is on that specifically, since we know about some non-compliant folks. Okay. I want to thank you guys all. This has been a tough year for a lot of folks. And the recovery of this city is dependent, obviously, on jobs. And if we don't know anything else, if we already as Black and Brown communities are behind in terms of just surviving in this city, if the recovery excludes us too, we not only will we be further behind, but it may be that we will never be able to catch up. The amount of hundreds of millions of dollars coming into this city to help us rebuild better than before has got to include us, has got to. And that's what, I think that's what's so important about these kinds of hearings. The 26% is really bothersome with the Boston residents. It's really bothersome. Wawa, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to add real quick, just to Councilor Mejia's point for the compliance part. I don't know if people are using the BRJP compliance determination rubric to evaluate some of these non-compliant contractors, because it clearly outlines what the sanctions should be for pretty specific non-compliance factors.
You want to speak to that?
Yeah, so we are using the rubric, but the current database that we have, the access database, it doesn't allow us to specifically track every form, that we need to be on good footing if we do try to find a contractor at this point. So that's why we're moving to Salesforce, which is a better tracking platform. So we'll be able to get to the point where we can find a contractor. And if someone wants to take, any type of action against us, we would have the database to show that, we've been able to track the material and contrast what we have.
Is somebody verifying the numbers that they're submitting? Because from what the presentation showed was like they just submit their numbers and people are taking it for good faith value. Is there some sort of verification process that's been implemented for Salesforce?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So yeah, that's what the monitors' jobs are. We do site visits, so they send us the paperwork, right? They say Chris Brown is working on a project down the street, and so the monitor, one part of their job is to go out to the construction site and look for Chris Brown, along with collecting other, proof that they live, proof of driver's license that they live at a certain address. The payrolls are coming into us. We're checking the payrolls. For compliance, we're reaching out to the general contractors. So we actively monitor projects on a daily basis to ensure that contractors are actually sending us what they're sending us is actually valid.
But no sanctions as of yet.
Right. Not. And again, I think, I don't know if you're aware, but a lot of these programs, and this is not an excuse, a lot of these programs have been challenged in different cities. So when we do get to the point where we are going to, find someone or sanction someone, We just want to make sure if someone pushes back on us, that legally we have a good foot to stand on. So that's why we're moving to Salesforce. We're implementing it now. We're training contractors. We're training the staff on the usage of Salesforce, and that's happening within the month. And then we're going to start migrating the projects that we have on the current database over to the new database, the Salesforce database.
Sounds good. So hopefully on the next one, we'll see some more sanctions.
We're always looking for them. Before we conclude, I regret I just received a letter from Councilor Campbell. I just want to read this into the record. Dear Chairwoman Edwards and colleagues in the Committee on Government Operations, I regretfully cannot attend today's hearing on docket 0567, order for a hearing regarding biannual review of the Boston Employment Commission and Boston Residents Job Policy. Thank you to Chairwoman Edwards for sponsoring this hearing and continuing to review these critical policies that ensure that the growth of our city is equitable. It is critical that we provide oversight on policies like the Boston Residents Job Policy to make sure that goals are met. I will be ably represented by a member of my staff at today's hearing and look forward to reviewing today's hearing reporting and committee report and working with the committee on any recommended next steps. Sincerely, Andrea J. Campbell, Boston City Councilor, District 4. So with that, I'm going to conclude this hearing. I will follow up with other additional questions and some meetings so that by October we have a robust conversation. So thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.